The Krillian enforcer held Commander Sarah Chen's plasma rifle like a trophy, its chitinous claws clicking in what passed for laughter among its species. Around them, the detention bay of the warship hummed with the presence of a dozen armed guards, each one towering over the human by at least 2 feet. "Primitive," the enforcer hissed in broken galactic standard. "You species always rely on tools. Without this, you are nothing." Sarah stood perfectly still in the center of the sterile chamber, her hands raised but her expression calm. Too calm, perhaps, for someone who had just been disarmed and captured while attempting to extract hostages from the Krillian vessel. Her dark eyes tracked the enforcer as it placed her rifle on a secure rack along the far wall, alongside weapons confiscated from a dozen other species. "You have no idea what you've done," Sarah said quietly. The enforcer's mandibles spread wide in amusement. "Threats? From a defenseless prey creature?" It gestured to the other guards. "Humans are all the same. Big words, big pride. But when the tools are gone, you are just soft meat." What the Krillians didn't understand, what most species in the galaxy failed to grasp, was that humans had been warriors long before they had been builders. They had mastered violence in an era when their greatest technology was sharpened stone, and that ancestral knowledge lived in their bones, their reflexes, their very DNA. Sarah's plasma rifle had never been just a weapon. It was a courtesy, a way to keep things civilized, a tool that allowed her to maintain the illusion that modern humanity had evolved beyond its brutal origins. The rifle's biometric lock had registered her elevated heart rate 3 minutes ago. It had detected the micro-tremors in her grip that indicated combat stress, and when the Krillians had torn it from her hands, breaking the physical connection, the rifle had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had called for backup. The enforcer was still gloating when Sarah's wrist display flickered to life. The Krillians didn't recognize the significance of the pulsing red icon that appeared there. They didn't know that every piece of human military equipment was networked, cross-compatible, and designed with a single philosophy in mind: no soldier fights alone.
"Last chance," Sarah said.
"Return my rifle and release the hostages. I can still make this peaceful." The enforcer struck her across the face with the back of its claw. The blow sent her sprawling, and she tasted copper on her tongue. The other guards chittered their approval, believing the display of dominance had settled the matter. Sarah wiped blood from her lip and smiled. That was when the walls exploded. The shaped charges were surgical in their precision, blowing 4 perfectly circular holes in the detention bay's hull, without compromising the ship's integrity. Through those holes came something the Krillians had never encountered in 300 years of conquest across the Orion Arm. They came 4 combat drones, each one roughly the size of a human torso but infinitely more lethal. They were painted matte black and moved with an insectile grace that seemed almost alive. But these weren't simple remote-controlled machines. These were extensions of human warfare philosophy, designed by a species that had spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing. The drones didn't hesitate. They didn't negotiate. They had been called, and they had come to retrieve their operator. The first guard died before it could raise its weapon, a tungsten dart punching through its carapace at hypersonic velocity. The second managed to fire a wild shot that scorched the ceiling before a drone's manipulator arm caught it by the throat and applied precisely 847 pounds of pressure, exactly enough to crush a Krillian's chitinous windpipe. The enforcer that had mocked Sarah finally understood its mistake. It scrambled for her plasma rifle, but Sarah was already moving. Years of close-quarters combat training took over as she rolled to her feet, snatched a piece of debris from the floor, and drove it upward into the soft joint beneath the enforcer's mandible. The creature gurgled and stumbled backward. One of the drones smoothly delivered Sarah's rifle to her waiting hands. The moment her fingers closed around the familiar grip, the weapon came alive, its display syncing with her neural interface and the tactical network that now controlled the engagement. Through her eyepiece, she could see the positions of all remaining hostiles, the status of the hostages 2 decks below, and the optimal path to extraction. "Analysis complete," a calm voice reported in her earpiece. "Hostile force 18 remaining. Civilian casualties 0. Recommended action: aggressive extraction." Sarah chambered around and moved toward the door, the drones forming a protective perimeter around her. The Krillians had built their reputation on overwhelming physical superiority, but they had never fought an enemy that treated warfare as a science, that iterated and improved with each generation, that refused to accept defeat as a permanent condition. "You called us primitive," Sarah said, stepping over the enforcer's twitching body. You thought taking my weapon made me helpless. She paused at the doorway, her expression cold. You forgot that humans don't need weapons to be dangerous. We invented weapons because we felt sorry for everything else. The next 15 minutes were a masterclass in human military doctrine. The drones provided overwatch and electronic warfare support, jamming Krillian communications and calculating optimal firing solutions. Sarah moved through the ship like a force of nature, her rifle an extension of her will. Each shot placed with precision born from centuries of accumulated martial knowledge. When she reached the hostages, 7 civilians from 3 different species, they stared at her with a mixture of terror and awe. The Krillians had told them humans were weak, that Earth's military was a joke compared to the established powers of the galaxy. The scorch marks and bodies told a different story. Time to go home, Sarah said, her voice gentle despite the circumstances. The drones had already carved an exit route through the hull, and a human rescue shuttle was closing fast. As they evacuated, the lead drone paused at Sarah's side. Its optical sensor fixed on her, and through the tactical network she felt something almost like curiosity from the machine intelligence. Effective deployment, it reported in synthesized tones. Human operator performance optimal, Sarah smiled grimly. That's why we built you. Not to replace us. She patted the drone's armored chassis, but to make sure we're never alone in a fight. Behind them, the Krillian warship erupted with alarms as its crew finally understood what had just happened. They had captured a human. They had taken her weapon. And in doing so, they had learned the hardest lesson in the galaxy. You can take the tools from a human, but you can't take the warrior, because humanity's real weapon was never the rifle, the drone, or the technology. It was the refusal to surrender, encoded in their genes by 4 billion years of evolution on a world that had tried everything to kill them and failed. The rifle was just a courtesy, a way to keep things civil. The drones were just tools to even the odds. But the human was the weapon, and she had just been called to war.